Please. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Incarceration Prevention and Reduction Task Force Steering Committee for Thursday, December 9th, 2021. It's about 11 a.m. and we're meeting virtually. We moved the date of this meeting up because of the events that just transpired by the County Council on Tuesday. We wanted to get everything in front of the task force as soon as possible. So that's the purpose of changing this meeting up to the 9th, rather than, I think it was a couple weeks from now. But let's go ahead and do the land acknowledgement and then we'll dig in. Before we begin, we acknowledge that we are gathered on the traditional and unceded territory of the Lummi, Nooksack, Samish, and Semiahmoo people who have cared for and tended this land since time immemorial. Truth and acknowledgement are critical to building mutual respect and connection across all barriers of heritage and difference. We begin this effort to acknowledge what has been buried by honoring the truth. We pay respect to their elders, past and present. Please take a moment to consider the many legacies of violence, displacement, migration, and settlement that bring us together here today, and please join us in uncovering such truths at any and all public events. Well, again, thanks for being here. I guess the best way to dig in and to summarize kind of what we're going to be talking about today is to take a look at the proposed amendment to the draft year-end report, which is our first agenda item.
Sorry, Barry, can we do the 2022 calendar first?
Oh, sure. Sorry, I wasn't looking at that. Yeah, go ahead, Jill.
Thank you. I am going to put this up on screen. Give me 1 second here. And just a couple notes. We need to schedule the steering committee for January. January is a difficult month to schedule on Mondays because Bellingham City Council uses all of them except for the holiday Mondays. So January 3rd would be that Monday, or January 4th is an option as well.
I guess I'm a little confused. We usually have our steering committees on Thursdays.
Right, and we can do that if we set the January agenda today, because the Thursday, that Thursday would be the 6th, which is the Thursday, right? That's just a few days before the meeting on the 10th. Unless we want to meet on a holiday week, the week between Christmas and New Year.
I don't think we're going to be here, so I don't think that'll work for me.
Right. So we can schedule the January meeting agenda mostly today, and then of course I can always issue an amended agenda later if necessary.
Okay.
And then for the first meeting in January for steering, we can either schedule it basically anytime or just not have one in January, whatever you guys want to do.
Well, we'll need one in January.
So the question is, when do you want to meet in January? Stephen?
Well, I'm wondering, is there some reason we couldn't meet a little later in January after the task force meeting on the 10th? I'm not saying necessarily I'm urging that. I'm just asking, isn't that in our list of options?
Yes, that is an option for sure.
Okay.
I think I want to make sure that we have, and that's why getting to the rest of the agenda is going to be important to kind of reflect back on this as well, because I want to definitely have a meeting before our first stakeholder advisory committee meeting on the 20th. So, because there's some planning to take place. So that's my request, that we are at least a week prior to that date. So like on the 13th.
Well, how about if we can schedule it on the 13th. That'll be after, a few days after the January task force meeting. Does that work for everyone? Is that what you prefer to do?
Works for me.
Okay. I will schedule it on the 13th. And
Would that, oh, I'm very sorry. Barry, would that be at the same time at 11?
Yeah, I would think so. I think we'll just leave that consistent.
Yeah, unfortunately, I would not be able to attend, but you could still probably have a quorum without me. But I have a conflict on Thursday, January 13th from 11 to 12:30,
Okay.
previous engagement. But I could reach out to Dan. I did see, I was trying to see if he could join, and then you at least have somebody from behavioral health.
Yeah.
In general, though, I'm really open other Thursdays, like the 6th, for example.
So, the 6th works fine for me. I don't know about everyone else.
And then the other one would be beyond that.
Yeah, let's go with the 6th then, because we'd love to have you there, Mike.
But does that work for other folks?
I saw a lot of thumbs up.
A lot of thumbs. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
great, thank you very much. I will schedule it on January 6th. And then just to clarify, all you're doing today is approving the meeting dates, the written report schedules for June and end of year are FYI only, and that information will not be on the final calendar.
Okay. Is that it for calendaring?
Yes, that's it.
Okay.
Barry, I don't understand what Jill just said. I thought the year-end report has a proposed amendment that we're supposed to review and approve. Did I miss?
Stephen, can you see on my screen on that I'm screen sharing?
Yes.
This information underneath the calendar where it says biannual written report scheduled June and biannual, that's nothing that you guys need to approve. That's just FYI for the steering committee to be aware of next year.
I got you.
I got you.
All of that's under the calendar item on the agenda.
Correct, yes.
I got you. I got you.
Okay, so if you, Jill, could you put up the amendment, proposed amendment to the year-end report?
Yeah, give me just 1 second here while I
Sure.
pull it. Can you see that?
Yes. So a little background before we get into what the county council did 2 nights ago. The leadership team, that would be myself as chair of the council's criminal justice and public safety committee, the sheriff, prosecutor Ritchie, and executive Sadhu. We met back in the probably September, October timeframe to talk about getting the whole process restarted on the needs assessment for a public safety facility and how we're gonna move forward on that. As you remember, we had a lot of things in place in 2019 that we were getting ready to roll on in 2020, and along comes a little thing called the pandemic. And the consultant we had hired couldn't travel. We couldn't convene meetings. We were just learning how to Zoom, and it was a pretty awkward time. So we ended up suspending that effort formally. The council did, as well as we canceled the contract that we had with the consultant. That was HOK. When we started talking about this again this year, we started examining kind of what that process looked like that we had designed. We had done one thing and had it completed, and that was the stakeholder advisory committee, which was kind of a version of the IPRTF, a lot of representation throughout the community to be able to participate in the kind of the public engagement side of this proposal. That has been done. That has been appointed, and that committee is basically seated, but hasn't been hasn't met at all yet. So that piece is done. So we talked about how to use that committee to the best of our, of our collective abilities. And the thought that came up was to have the Incarceration Prevention Reduction Task Force and essentially, especially the steering committee, kind of be a coordinating body around the material that's created from the technical side. And I'll dive into that in more detail later. But there's a lot of expertise. There's a lot of credibility on this task force that really gives the local flavor for a needs assessment. It gives it much more of a look, not coming from a jail planner. That was some of the criticism that we'd received over the years, that some of the people that we had hired to do needs were the people that would build the jail later. So that's kind of a fox hen house situation. So it was really a big desire of that leadership team to really engage the task force in helping get through this process. So we presented that to the council, and the memo that we presented is something Jill will be putting up in a minute. And the council voted unanimously on Tuesday night to add this effort to the work plan of the task force. So we had to take a number of steps to kind of legitimately request that the IPRTF do some work on this. So that was the way we did it. We did it through a motion. Again, it passed unanimously. And so this memo this amendment that Jill has up really summarizes kind of the overview of the work. It's in 3 phases. Phase 1 is the one that's probably it's going to need the most work out of this group. It's the behavioral health analysis side, as far as asset mapping and gap analysis and what we think we need in our community for behavioral health, especially with regards to criminal justice. So that is what we're here to talk about, on how we can do that and how we can aid that stakeholder advisory committee in their work and the council in their work, and so on and so on. This is kind of I call it a 4-legged stool. We have the 3 traditional legs, which is kind of what we're calling the technical advisory committee, and that's staff in the corrections and the prosecutor's office and the people that will bring a lot of the technical material to the table. We have the stakeholder advisory committee, which is the second leg, which is the one I described. And then the IPRTF is going to be kind of the policy and the steering arm to help shape the work. And you'll see how that can kind of roll out in a minute. And then the fourth, not leg, but the top of the stool is the public side and the public engagement we feel is so important and was missing from the first 2 proposals that were run in 2015 and 2017. We just felt that the public just wasn't that informed. And when we did our listening tours, that was one thing we heard, was better public engagement in the process, so the community knows what's going on. And we don't just have something appear on a ballot out of nowhere. And so anyway, Jill, could you put up anyway, you see the phase 1 is a needs assessment. And the assessment is a comprehensive analysis of local criminal justice policy, public safety needs, behavioral health needs, and facility needs. So what we've done, what Jill has done, and done such a great job. She took the memo that I submitted to the council and kind of ripped it apart and took some of those action items and made a table that I think, Jill, you can put that up, right?
Yeah, give me a sec. All right, is this what you want to see, Barry?
Yes, thank you. Can everybody see that okay? We will send this out after this meeting, along with some other materials. We have a resolution that the council passed a couple years ago that are planning principles that kind of this this whole concept is derived out of that resolution. So
Interject super fast. I just got a text from Dan who's trying to get in. Jill, Dan is not able to get in. Is it possible to just resend him the Zoom link?
Yeah, I can send it. I sent it right before 11.
I know, that's what I used.
So let me.
And I'm sorry, Barry, I apologize to interrupt you. He's trying to get in and seeing if I could help.
oh,
All right,
sure.
thank you. Please continue.
So, so what Jill has done here for this phase one is we kind of did a who and a what. And as you see, the phase one is when we really dig in and we start working on the behavioral health analysis. That's kind of step one. And as you can see, we have engaged Crossroads with Holly O'Neill and Marty Solomon to facilitate those meetings in 2022. Marty's on this meeting listening in so she can hear, our discussions. And they'll do these basic things of, preparing agendas and facilitate the meeting throughout 2022. Hi, Dan. Oh, Dan's not quite connected. Welcome, Dan. So what we're talking about is a motion that the county council passed on Tuesday night to have the Incarceration Prevention Reduction Task Force put on their work plan for 2022 the criminal justice and facility needs assessment that we're undergoing to help kind of steer that process. So, and what I'm going through right now is Jill had taken the memo that I had presented to the council and kind of deconstructed it and got the action items dug out of this so we can kind of see this is the start of a work plan. This is a very, very, as you can see, it's got a draft watermark on it. It's the start of the process, and it's kind of this. My vision is that this group can help steer that work plan as well and shape it as we go along. So it's work in progress. But anyway, the group is large. The Stakeholder Advisory Committee, it's about 36 people. And so we knew that herding that many cats was going to be a challenge. So that's why we engaged with Holly and Marty at Crossroads to help us facilitate those meetings and keep everything moving smoothly. We have like I said, we felt that the communications was really important. Could you scroll down just a little bit, Jill? And at the time that we put in for our mid-biennium adjustment budget request, I put in a request back in October for $50,000 for the task force for communications help, outside help. And in talking with the leadership team, we thought that, since the task force is going to be involved in this effort, that some of that public engagement work can be shared between general task force work and this work, and have that whatever firm that we decide to go with would help us create a community engagement plan and help us to execute that. So this is a list under community engagement, what we had targeted, and some of this came from the contract that the consultant had done prior to that contract that we have suspended. But these are just a lot of the general, listening forums, group meetings, public town hall type meetings, just to come up with a really good way to keep the public informed as we move through the needs assessment process. Can you scroll down some more, Jill? So this is the meat of things. This is the needs assessment, kind of the outline. When we talk about behavioral health, this is, like I said before, this is step one, that we're going to evaluate our behavioral health system and current criminal justice and jail needs. So one of the reasons that this group it was identified by the leadership team is because we've worked on so many programs to help reduce incarceration, and we'd be looking at it with that eye. We'd be looking at tightening things, looking at our programs, how they're performing, how that kind of intersects with our behavioral health system that we have now, which is that asset mapping piece that's listed first. And it's just an itemized inventory of our current revenue streams, funding, and the programs that are in place. And a lot of that we have in this packet, as well as our kind of the task force expanded version of the sequential intercept model that lists a lot of our programs that are supporting those pieces under the intercept model. So a lot of this asset mapping has been done. It just needs to be kind of corralled and updated. The trickier part and the most important part probably is once we get that inventory, that we can be able to do a gap analysis and figure out what's the gap between what we have and what we think we need. And I know we've talked about that in this committee, in and out of that discussion about a urgent care facility. And to be honest, my vision and actually the leadership team's vision is looking at this as something a little larger than just a public safety initiative or a facility that we're looking at the needs for, but something that's a little bit broader, a little bit more that includes behavioral health in the whole proposal. So we're trying to look at it under that eye, that we're have a more holistic approach to our facility design and what we might be able to put together. It's say some sort of a campus. It's a public health and safety campus that could have all those services in one general area. So anyway, down to the gap analysis, we would go through that, and the folks that you can see all the people or groups that we've kind of identified as potential helpers in this effort. And I've cleared with both the executive and the director of the health department that we would be able to use some of Perry's expertise and out of the Health and Human Services Department to help provide some of that technical side of things. But anyway, that's probably some of the most important work that we have to do first is the behavioral health side. And then we have that question that we've always asked, that also that Vera asked, who should be in the jail? That's another question, and that's our data analysis. That's a lot of the things that we're going to have to do to decide, at the end of the day, somebody's got to say we need a facility that's going to house X amount of X amount of capacity. So that's when this work starts. Notice this has got some question marks on it because we feel that we're probably going to need some outside help in this area from some sort of a consultant that has best practices on some of the data analytics. And that's the things that we've talked about when we've been talked about the index committee and potentially needing some outside help there as well. So that's another thing that we could do, two birds with one stone on, where we could help Caleb out in his work, as well as look at how we could analyze the data on this initiative that we're working on. And that's this needs for additional services that Jill has listed down here. What services? These are other services. Needs for additional services like in the behavioral health, any of our diversion programs or any ideas that we have for new programs. These are the kind of things that we would also be looking at. This is not this basically this phase one is pretty much a 1 year project. We're not trying to get this all done in 1 year because I don't think it's feasible. We think that it's going to take that second year probably just to put together the financial agreements that we have to have with the city of Bellingham and the small cities and so on. That's a complicated piece of the puzzle as well. So that comes down a lot later. So that's in a nutshell what the council is asking. The initial effort would be a January 20th kickoff meeting for the Stakeholder Advisory Committee at 1 p.m. It's going to be a virtual meeting. The first meeting is basically going to be designed to get everybody up to speed and on the same page. It'll be kind of a Project 101 discussion, because we haven't had any discussion at all with that group yet. So we won't be digging into a lot of the specifics that I went over today. We might be able to throw up, for instance, the sequential intercept model to show that group kind of the methodology that the task force has used to identify both needs for funding and how effective our programs are. So that's a lot I threw at you. We had to do this in intentional steps. We had to get the council to request this work. And it was a unanimous vote to have the IPTRF help on this. So what we're looking for today is a recommendation to the full task force that we take this on and discuss it on Monday. So with that, I will open it up to, I know there's going to be more questions than the answers that I've given you. So, Stephen?
Yeah, so many questions, Barry. You talked about the steering committee being the real action hub for the task force's participation in this. But none of the materials I saw mentioned the steering committee. They mentioned the IPRTF. And I should also say for the rest of the group that SAC committee from its earlier iterations includes Jack and I representing the task force. So I guess I'm a little bit unclear how the sole mention of the IPRTF integrates with the focus on the steering committee, and how Jack and I would play an intermediary role in that.
Well, the second one I don't know, because what your intermediary role is, I think that's to be determined. But the first question, the first piece of that, I think whenever IPTRF shows up on here, to me it was just assumed that starts with the steering committee, because we'll be using the steering committee as both a kind of a guidepost, but as well as maybe farming some of this work out to the committees. So that's why it makes sense for things to start just as they do most often on all the initiatives that we work on through the task force, start here in this committee. So you can put steering next to IPTRF in just about every instance here.
Okay. I guess my follow-up question is trying to understand the needs assessment. Is the goal of that in part to be able to cost out a dollar figure that will go plug into the ballot initiative? Is that where we're headed with that?
I'm not sure that this piece, the analytics of this side of it need to do that. I think you come up with a final capacity, and then that gets turned over to people that do this kind of work, that can put together, let's say architectural renderings, for instance, and to be able to cost that out. I don't expect this group to be able to do that kind of work. I think it's pretty complicated. So the financing side of things, I think we're keeping kind of separate from the task force work. Although we have to be somewhat cognizant of it so we don't overbuild as well. So there's some tricky ground there to navigate, I think, Stephen.
I guess the financing people don't know what it takes to build a service or a continuum of services. So that's a crack that I see that worries me. The last thing I'll say, and then I'll let other people get their questions in, is over and over again, the two stumbling blocks we've run into and that I don't see addressed, at least on Jill's chart, in a way that seems full enough to me, is the availability of supported housing and the totally non-functional and inadequate system or connected systems of data. I mean, this isn't talking about building the kind of data system that we know we need because we've been stymied in much of what we wanted to do by the lack of it.
Well, what you're doing now is describing the work of this steering committee to help flesh this plan out. Because again, this motion was done on Tuesday. This chart was put together yesterday. So that's why I'm saying it's work in progress. So if there's something not there, it probably needs to go there.
Okay, and I just, since people will be working off charts like this, which I think is very helpful, I just wanted to flag where I thought there were things that weren't showing up.
Yeah, and I think that's the next thing, one of the next pieces that we have to do. We have to take a look at this and start adding to it, just as you mentioned, to make sure that we're really looking at everything in a holistic way. Because I agree, supported housing, all that stuff that you talked about is super important in this analysis. Raylene?
Years ago, we had a meeting with the whole task force, if I recall correctly. And I think it was when we were working on the intercept sequential model. And I believe at that point, we had all the different groups, all the different subcommittees. And there was a lot of sticky notes and notes put on what committee was going to work on what subject. And I think having the steering committee kind of direct things is great, but I think to start with, you might want to bring it to the whole task force and say, this is what we want each committee to work on. This is where we think each section should be at, and then bring it back to the steering committee from the subcommittees. But that's just a suggestion, and I'm sure there's a lot of other options and opinions.
Oh, I know. I like that, Raylene. I think that's why we're not trying to do this in 3 or 4 or 5, 6 months. We're trying to make sure that we do a thorough job. And I think, again, this points to the reasoning why the task force was identified as such a valuable tool in this process, because we can do that. And I remember that exercise too, putting those sticky notes up. So it's got to be interactive between the steering committee and the full task force, and kind of follow our normal process that we do on everything else. Arlene, you're on mute.
This is a really big discussion and important that we're talking about. And it's something that we've had to face at some point because of, so to speak, dropping the ball. Everybody here knows that there were 2 times that the public in this community decided not to build a large jail. And so the question is, can we design it in a way that will be acceptable to the public and acceptable to the people who think that it's vital to have social services to fill the gaps and everything? It sounds like a real attempt to do that. It's scary to me because it sounds like a really large project, but we need it. We need it really badly, all the missing parts. And we also need a way to house people who are in jail and to provide a progressive system for people who are in jail, most of all focused on restoration. And so when we talk about reentry, it has to be a vital part of the process of being in jail. Typically, it starts at the beginning, from the minute the person enters jail. So I'm getting off on a sidebar, but all of these things are interconnected, and it does also make extremely good sense for the members of this task force to inform SAC, because we've just spent several years informing ourselves about what services are, what services are not there, and what will be needed. So that part is very sensible and is a good decision, I think. I personally am a member of SAC, and I'm a member of this task force. Is that a conflict in any way?
No, we think it's a value.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
Mike?
Thanks, Barry. I've got this sticky note. It's actually my wife's sticky note, and it says, "Stop me before I volunteer for something." So I guess as I reflect, Barry, on this, I think part of me, the excited part of me says, yeah, this is an opportunity, right, to maybe work with our partners who are running our current jail, who know how this stuff works, right, working hand in hand to develop something the community will like. So Arlene, I really appreciate your comments and agree with a lot of what you said. I do have a couple concerns, as you can imagine, which is probably why I popped on. Your budget ask to get some help for us to get a communications consultant was key and was really prescient and super smart. But in my mind, that was already spoken for. We had existing communication issues prior to taking on a project of this size. And to combine it means that we are going to be somewhat similar to where we're at. So I'm concerned about that. I'm concerned about doubling down on something, and we have some infrastructure needs currently in front of us, which Barry, I think you were trying to address, and I really appreciate. But I don't see that if we are not adding dollars to that, or changing the scope, or adding some additional paid work for this wonderful group of volunteers we call the task force, I wonder how well that we will do. I see as great as a consulting group, as steering, as guiding some of the conversations, as some of the wisdom. But one of the things that we've seen in Index, and Stephen, I guess I'm going to be guilty of hitting Stephen's point about data. A lot of this, a lot of what the IPRTF could do to help this conversation of the jail to get this lifted is going to require data. And what I don't see in the one pager is how that's being addressed. I see two kind of infrastructure needs that the IPRTF had before this giant task in front of us. And I don't know about the other committee members, but I think shoring that up and addressing those things will be absolutely critical so that you get the high quality really kind of steering and advice and thoughts and analysis and gap analysis that you're seeking for it to be really good. And maybe this is just me personally. I know that we need to get help in that matter to get the data that we need so that we can make data-driven solutions. And it's not just based on our thoughts or feelings or opinions. Arlene, I really respect your opinion too, that we have spent a lot of time educating ourselves. And I think that's a good thing. And I think there is definitely a role. I just want to affirm that, yes, I think a space for the IPRTF in this process is, in my mind, wholly welcome. But I guess I'm seeing a couple of infrastructure needs that I think need to be addressed for it to be as high quality and to be as instructive, Barry, as you're hoping it could be. And I would hate for us to be in a situation where we feel like we don't have the capacity in one way, shape, or form to do that high quality.
Well, let me address that because we have talked about that. First of all, the ask for the 50K was before this was even thought of. So that was just a placeholder. We can certainly increase that budget. We're not going to probably ask the communications person for this effort to do much more than just design a program, and then we would figure out how to carry that out. Because you're right, that's not enough money to do all this work, not even close. And additionally, we've also talked about we're going to need help along the way on some of these critical questions that you're asking. Data, that was one that floated right to the top. We're going to need best practices consulting work, third-party work along the way, and that's where this steering committee can come up with those kind of suggestions that you just laid out, Mike. that would be something that we would take back to the council, say, hey, we really feel we need some help understanding the data, and we want to put out an RFP. We have the money in the new jail fund to do this work that's already been approved by the council. We just have to execute what's already been budgeted. So best practices for data, best practices for when we start getting into looking at hard numbers. We might need help with that too. If understanding the data is one thing, but then correlating that data to what your actual capacity needs are is another important step in that process. So the leadership team recognizes that we're going to need help, maybe data-wise, some of the best practices on criminal justice capacities and buildings. But I totally agree with you. We're not going to do this work on our own, and that's why, like, I'll just keep saying this over and over again. That's why this work plan that we're laying out today is work in progress. It's just it was just to get something up in front of the group so we could do this kind of thing. Look at it and find the holes, find where we need to bolster it. So that's part of this. Is again why I think it was a good idea to bring it to this group, because there's a lot of fruitful ideas that come up in these discussions. Stephen?
Thanks, Barry. One of the ways that I've gotten to be as old as I am and still procrastinate as badly as I do is sometimes that turns out to be a good thing. And I think that may be the case this time. Everybody remembers when Dr. Alexis Harris presented to the task force, we had a conversation about drawing her in to help us with data in the task force context. I was supposed to follow up and engage her, and I haven't done that yet. But I'm wondering, because it seems to me to be the case, whether I'm hoping to contact her and try to arrange for a small group of us to talk with her early in January. It seems like a new question we might pose to her is, could she help us with the data end of what this planning process might be, which would rebound to the benefit of the task force as a whole as well. And I see Caleb getting on, so I'm going to stop and let him pick up there. But Barry, I'd welcome your thoughts on Dr. Harris being part of a conversation here.
Yeah, Stephen, I thought of that as well. I think that's a great idea. Caleb?
Thank you. So I agree. I think that there's more questions now, it's kind of exciting from that aspect. Just if I could be allowed to soapbox for just a moment. I think that in the past, our initiatives have been fairly focused, I think, to try and make sure that we're accomplishing a specific goal. But when it comes to the programs that exist in our nation and certainly around the world, I think that we should be casting a wider net, because there are certainly programs that are effective at reducing incarceration, at reducing recidivism rates, and taking a more holistic approach to dealing with the issues that our community is facing, and recognizing that we haven't come up with all the right answers yet. And so again, I would ask that we cast a pretty wide net. I myself have been to other states, other counties, and looked at some of the programs that have existed in other areas. And I've seen some good work being done in other areas that I think that we could try and accomplish here. But if we get focused quickly on something that sort of gets in a way, we get a logjam sort of effect, and we march in a direction that isn't necessarily best for the community. Again, I'm just soapboxing a little bit here. But I think that this initiative is timely. Being in the jail right now is it's a tough place. It's a tough place to be. It's a tough place to work. And we have staff that feel like what they're doing on a daily basis is essentially irrelevant because of the limitations of the facility that we have. We have a high acuity rate, as I think we've discussed while I was gone at the task force meeting last time. So this is absolutely timely in terms of what we where we headed on this. So I'm excited about the initiative, but again, wide net. That's what I'm thinking.
That's a great idea, Caleb. And I just wanted to also address Arlene's kind of first point about the public, and that's why we're going to put so much focus on public engagement, and having the task force do things in the light of day makes a big difference to the public too, because all these planning meetings that we're going to be doing through whatever we're going to be doing through the task force, they're public meetings, and they're transparent and available for the public to be able to view that. So, you know, it just it's going to make a huge difference in my mind, Arlene, that we have a stakeholder advisory committee. That's a big deal. But we're going to even go wider than that, a wider net, as Caleb said, even on the community engagement side of things. We're going to do as much as we can to make sure that the public comes along with us on our journey to wherever we end up. Other questions? Jill?
Thanks, Barry. I don't have a raise hand icon on my computer here, so I'm gonna just butt in. I'm gonna scroll up back up to the community engagement section. And Barry, I was wondering if you wanted to let the group know that we talked yesterday, going back to the original question for this agenda item and adding a note to the year-end report. What Barry and I talked about yesterday for amending the scope of work for the communications contractor was isolating that work simply to having a contractor come up with a plan for carrying out all this community engagement. And correct me if I'm wrong, Barry, if I'm saying this wrong, because all of this work, I'm under the impression, Barry, that it's not this work that's going to be included in the scope of work for our contractor. Is that correct?
That's correct. These are just suggestions on kind of a result of a brainstorm about community engagement. So
Right.
You're correct, Jill. We would be creating a community engagement plan that would be both for the task force, because that was what the original intent for the budgeted item was, and the general task force work, and then this initiative too. So, you know, it's probably one plan that they would create. It would just have a subsection on this piece. So I don't think we would stretch the consultant too thin on the planning side of things. But you're right. We wouldn't expect out of that contract them to actually execute this from their standpoint. We would figure that out how we wanted to do that once we have a plan. Mike?
I think you're hitting exactly where my question was, and I think I almost heard the answer that I was seeking. So in terms of then consultant A, let's say, or this first one kind of helps us devise a communication strategy and a plan, then contract B is the person that actually creates content.
Correct. It could be the same person. Who knows? It could be an extension of the contract, but which would be probably a good idea. But yeah, you're right.
Okay. Thank you.
Other questions? Dan?
Can you guys hear me okay?
Yep.
Okay. Sorry, I've got you on a phone and a computer screen right now. So, and I apologize for being late. I was coming from a different meeting. So Barry, if I heard you right, it sounds like this is a 2-year process from today to get to getting something in front of voters. If the voters approve it, then what is the timeline after that?
That's I have no idea. How long all this takes. I think what did they figure before, Caleb? 4 years from go time, 5 years.
It depends on what it is that we make, right? And
yeah,
again,
right.
Part of the whole caution here is if we set out thinking this is what we're going to build, we want to be careful that we might be looking at something totally different. As Barry mentioned, we might want a system that looks slightly different than what anybody else is doing, but it will work better for our community. So I would say cautiously, on the short side, it would take 24 months from the first shovel to, something that's functional, and then more long-term, maybe 4 years.
Okay, thank you.
So I guess what we wanted to do today is, number one, we want to take a look at Jill's amendment to the year-end report, and have a motion out of this group to recommend to the task force, and on Monday, that we would take this work on and discuss it some more at the task force, obviously at the task force level.
Would you like me to put the year-end report amendment back up on the screen? Or-
Sure, let's tackle that one
Okay.
first.
In the meantime, Barry, are you thinking that you would lead a similar kind of discussion at the task force meeting as we're having here?
Yes.
Okay,
So if you look at the last paragraph of this amendment, it talks about what I will add to the scope of work to the communications consultant. And keep in mind, this is just a very general summary to go into the year-end report that will go to county council. It's not detailed or specific at all. This is just to let them know what's coming up next year.
Yeah. So we'd be looking for a motion to approve this amendment, right?
Jill, I'm sorry, where would you place this in the year-end report?
In the year-end report, in the section for the full task force, that's the section Introduction to Task Force Efforts.
Yep,
Section B, what's next in 2022? So it would be an additional bullet point under that section.
gotcha. But what would be the heading of that bullet point?
I have not thought that far, Stephen.
Okay, okay.
Dan, Mike?
Finding my unmute button. Sorry, I think I know where that thing was. I think, Barry, you've really handled a bunch of our questions and feedback quite well. But I'm in this particular document, and maybe this is just me, so maybe I'm the only co-chair or chair that's a little squeamish with this. I'm not seeing some of the pieces about where we will be able to depend on consultants, about how we're really going to provide support and assistance and guidance. It reads a lot like we will create that facility design and alternative analysis, as I see here. And I'm wondering if anybody else feels this way, that it might make some sense to, that we're to flesh out that really what we're doing is kind of guiding a process, but that we're also going to engage professionals, and that the task of the IPRTF and the SAC is going to be to guide the work of those professionals, to partner with those professionals, to support it, and also to call out when they're going in a direction that does not meet, as Caleb said, our community's needs or wishes. And currently I don't see that in here. And I don't know, maybe others don't see a need to have that in there, but I just, it seems an awful lot like the IPRTF is by agreeing to this, is saying that we will produce those documents. And I for one think we could do so with a whole lot of consultants and professional assistants doing a lot of that legwork, where we are providing more that kind of expert driving. And I'll stop there.
Yeah, no, you hit it right on the head of why this idea was even thought of. Steering and policy is really what the IPRTF is going to provide, and we can firm that up in some language for the task force for Monday. Because again, we just put this together yesterday, so it's building the plane while we're flying it. So I agree, Mike, and that's the thought is that this steering committee and via the IPRTF will identify those needs for a consultant and recommend that to the council, that we need a data analysis. That'd probably be one of the first decisions we might make. So yes, and we'll firm that language up so expectations are clear. Stephen?
Yeah, I agree with Mike's point. So tweaking this a little bit, Jill, would be helpful in that regard. My eye also falls on the lead-in sentence to the bullets that says the IPRTF will work with the SAC to carry out the initiatives, phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. Actually, as I understood your description, Barry, which was very informative, as Mike said, neither the IPRTF nor the SAC will do anything other than phase 1. We're not going to be involved in facility design or feasible financing strategies in phase 3. So I think the focus of the IPRTF's role probably ought to be clarified in that regard as well.
Yeah, that's a good point, Stephen. The phase 2, we might see a little bit of the phase 2, but it'll be more of it'll be coming to us. We won't be generating that. And phase 3, you're absolutely correct. Yeah, that'll be a whole different effort. And I don't know how we want to do that, Jill, because I think Jill's attempt was just to describe the initiative in itself.
Right. Thank you,
Rather than-
Stephen. Yeah, thank you, Stephen, for mentioning that. That sentence was exactly what I was going to jump in and say. I can amend, I can take Mike's comments and restructure that sentence accordingly, and also with those bullet points as well. I will do that, and I don't think you guys need to approve a motion for this today unless you want to, but ultimately whatever amendment fixes I can create, I'll send around to everyone, but that will have to be made as a separate motion to the task force on Monday to amend that report as well. So,
well, maybe that's a good idea that you amend this per this discussion that we've had today. Circulate that in the next day or so, and then we can have a solid proposal to present on Monday. I like that.
So Monday, we're going to take 2 actions. We're going to agree to amend the report, and we're going to agree to the council's invitation to involve us in working with the SAC and helping guide that phase 1 work.
Right.
Okay.
well, I would add a third motion would be to then, once all that's done, approve the year-end report for submission to the county council.
Oh, the overall, yeah, we have
As
to
amended.
amend, yeah, we have to amend the report and then approve it as amended. Correct. Yeah.
Okay.
So, what do we want to do in terms of action today? We know, okay, the report, we don't need to do that today. Is everyone comfortable? We can just do it by head nod too, with bringing this forward to the task force on Monday. And I'll do the presentation.
Can I ask, Barry, if any of you have had a chance to review the rest of the report, are there any other changes or suggestions you have for that? Yes, no, thumbs up, thumbs down?
Jill, I was going to reach out to you separately. I just have a minor
Okay,
suggestion, but I was
Okay.
just going to email you if that's okay.
yeah, sure, absolutely.
Okay.
If you want to do that after the meeting, that would be really helpful. Thanks,
Yeah, I was
Mike.
going to do it before the end of the day. I know you need it now.
Cool. Anyone else?
You made some of the modifications that I had suggested, Jill. Thank you so much. I think that looks fine.
Thank you, Perry.
Okay. Well, thank you all for indulging that long dissertation, but I think the work that can come out of this initiative, it will be much better given the guidance of this group and the task force. Some of the work that can get done and vetting a lot of this stuff, it's going to make a big difference on the outcome. And I appreciate you all, your support. Stephen?
I just want to thank you, Barry, for moving this forward. I really think it's time to take up this work again in the channels that you're doing it. The caution I would add is this isn't the only work for the task force. And so I hope the committees and the task force don't have all their time and attention co-opted toward this process, that we keep working on the programmatic developments to prevent and reduce incarceration that are already underway and being talked about.
Yeah, I agree, Stephen. I mean, that's really the reason this group is so important in this work, is because we can be working on the gaps as we find them. So, Mike.
I was just gonna mention, we've been talking a little bit as we adopted the Gare Racial Equity Toolkit, as the county has now joined it. I would just say, and I'm a student in this, but my analysis of this move, of the engagement process, the philosophy, the widespread, is very congruent with what a racial equity toolkit would recommend, which is, as Caleb says, cast a very wide net. And so, I know some of us anyway struggle with how do we apply that in the work that we do. And I would say that this, being very process focused, slowing it down and taking that time to get the community input, is exactly what the toolkit would push us to do. So I guess from that point of view, I'll probably bring it up at every steering committee meeting, just to keep us somewhat grounded in the fact of how important considerations of racial equity are in all things that we do. And based on it's just my single layperson's student's idea that this is pretty congruent. And I just want to say that I think that's really solid, Barry.
Thank you, Mike. All right. Again, thanks for the support. And I guess our next item is items for the next task force agenda. And this would be the task force agenda in January, right? So this item will obviously be on there in some form to talk about update or whatever. So you can count on that, Jill.
Well, I don't know what we have carried over to, in line to be on the agenda, Jill, but this seems like item number one, and I would say it. I mean, we've easily taken a lot of time, an hour, to talk about this, and we're probably better informed than the average task force member. So I think a pretty sizable chunk of our time ought to be devoted to this.
I don't know what my co-chair thinks, but I think having our committees digest this, think about that a little bit, to do some kind of internal, subcommittees strategy. So obviously, speaking as behavioral health co-chair, this is a pretty crucial subject, and I think there's going to be a lot of thought. So we might spend our next behavioral health meeting. Well, obviously we have a joint meeting with legal, and which is going to be an amazing meeting, by the way. I'm excited about the topic. And some of hopefully the speaker that we'll get. But I think we're going to need to digest this a bit and have the committees reflect. And maybe then by that time in that January meeting, I think we will have met, if I'm not mistaken, Jill and Dan, we will have met. And maybe then the committees included in their report could be at least a little bit about their first initial thoughts about how they view their role in our overall process. I don't know if the other chairs also agree, but it could be useful. Then they will have had time, I guess, to digest, think about that, and then either share concerns or enthusiasm.
Yeah, I think that sounds like a great idea.
Yeah, Mike, it doesn't look like there are going to be any committee meetings between the December task force and the January task force. So just FYI.
Thanks.
And I will schedule this item as the big topic for January then. I'm trying to think if there's anything else housekeeping wise. In January, usually have everyone sign up for their annual committee assignments, but that's pretty quick. That goes pretty quick. So I think that will be a good agenda. And if necessary, we can amend it after I send out the agenda in early January. And if you think of anything else in the meantime, let me know.
Raylene?
Thank you. With our joint meeting, I think the committee updates on the next task force meeting will be helpful, because I think this first meeting that we're going to be having of the joint is going to just kind of start something that's going to take several meetings and several separate subcommittee meetings to get an answer to. I understand that Wendy and Caleb won't be able to join us at the next joint meeting, but my impression from Ms. Copeland is that we're going to have several individuals from DSHS and behavioral health that are very interested in assisting us with mental health competency and restoration, which will lead into re-entry. And they are a very large topic, which Wendy Jones had pointed out. And at some point, we will need to separate things. But this is just kind of to give us a start and where we want to proceed. So I think bringing that to the task force as a committee update will be important.
Dan?
Yeah, just to Raylene's point, I'm wondering when we bring this to the broader task force, the discussions that we're going to be having here next Tuesday from the joint meeting, because it is such a big topic. I don't know if we want to break it up over a couple of task force meetings now that we're talking about facilities and broader systems. But I just want to make sure that we get that on we get the competency of restoration and the systems items that we're going to be talking about next Tuesday. I just want to understand from the group what you all think about when we should do those report outs.
Dan, I think we're going to want to see where this meeting brings us, and then maybe decide towards the end of our joint meeting on how we want to proceed. I don't know if we'll have the correct answer prior to the start of the meeting.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah, that sounds good.
I will off topic jump in and say, for the meeting on this coming Monday, be aware that this will be Moonwater's and Byron's last meeting on the task force. Their terms are up in January. And actually, you know what? I could be wrong on that, because their terms expired January 31st. So never mind. They'll be at the January 10th meeting, hopefully. Okay, never mind.
Are they termed out as well, or?
They are termed out, yes.
Jill, besides the passive sort of posting of the county board and commission vacancies, do we do anything affirmative or proactive to solicit applications? I can't remember.
Well, yeah, I send the vacancy list and information around. I send it out as a press release. I send it to all city halls, all public libraries. Gosh, I have a list. I reached out for those boards and commissions that are based out of the health department. I've asked the health department to make that information available on their social media. Same with our public works department, who also has an active social media presence for their boards and commissions. So there's a few things that we've done to reach out. But if you guys have any other ideas, please send them my way, because I'm happy to get it out to as many people as possible.
Yeah, I would encourage all of us within our own networks to reach out to people who are prospective candidates who might be interested. I'd underscore and eternal thanks to Mike for his repeated appearance on racial equity issues. That this is an opportunity to make some improvements in the composition of the task force toward equity. And I'd also commend Dan and Mike for the people they've brought into the Behavioral Health Committee, and some of those might actually want to step up to the task force as a whole as well. So any contacts there or within the agencies that you've made relationships with would be reasonable prospects also.
Jill, would it be possible to include, like, for example, tribal nations, large educational institutions? Is that a reasonable request that we just cast a slightly larger net? And I know we can't just give you like rafts of individual email addresses. That's not really functional. But I guess I'm thinking of some key areas, like our educational institutions, Whatcom and Western, who have just really broad networks in a tap in. And then obviously our tribal nations neighbors, while I believe there are some slated seats in the composition, this could be an opportunity for additional, more, or different, and getting it in front of those people. Is that a reasonable request? Or
It is reasonable, particularly if you have specific individuals in mind for those institutions and their contact info. That would be helpful. But I can start. I have the info for the tribal nations, so I have that. But if you have specific individuals at Western or BTC or Whatcom, that would be helpful.
Okay, I was thinking like Chris Roselli at Western Washington, who Dan's nodding. Yeah, and Dan, I don't remember what his title is, but I believe he's kind of outward facing kind of communications, public relations for that group.
Yeah, I don't remember his exact title, but that he works with Donna Gibbs, and she's a VP up there. And yeah, he's pretty high up, and it is outward facing. So it'd be good to have someone from higher ed. I agree with the tribal communities to have more representation there as well.
And Jill, one other thought would be NAMI, and it's obviously our NAMI chapter is not huge in Bellingham, but important. And maybe reaching out to our NAMI chapter could be very useful, especially with going into tearing into jail work. They have a unique lens on behavioral health and what works with people. They could really also help us with peer-led things, which I think that type of expertise could be really helpful as we're thinking about diversions and alternative strategies.
Yeah, that's great information. And in fact, it occurs to me as well, Jackie Mitchell did such a great job putting together, and her staff putting together a list of the behavioral health and housing providers in our community for our communications roster. So that's a great idea to tap into that as well. Thank you.
How many openings do we have?
So there are 4 terms ending, 2 for the social services providers, which are currently filled by Moonwater and Byron. They're term limited out. And then also Heather's position as a citizen and Deborah Hawley's position as a consumer or family member. Those terms are expiring, but they're both eligible to reapply. So 4 plus, as you mentioned, Mike, the 2 vacant tribal positions.
Okay. Anything else on task force schedules, agendas? Any other business for the good of the order? And we'll is there anyone in the public, Jill?
Yes, we have 1 person in attendance today. Jackie, if you would like to speak to the committee, please virtually raise your hand now. And no hands are raised.
Okay. Anybody else have anything? I really.
Wait. Jackie did raise her hand. Jackie, hang on 1 second. Okay, Jackie.
Okay, thanks. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. I just want to say, I thought that was really good work, Barry, on the proposal there with the SAC. I think it's a great idea to utilize some existing infrastructures because there's just so much going on and a lot of work to be done. And I think we really need to utilize as best we can and as efficiently as possible the folks that are in place. So using the steering committee, I think, was a great idea for helping out with that piece. And I think that was all I had to say. Thanks.
Thanks, Jackie. All right, folks. Thanks for being receptive to this large idea, and we'll talk about it a little bit more on Monday. Obviously, a lot more, not a little bit. So with that, we are adjourned. Jill, I'll give you a call in a little bit. I got something I got to attend to, but I'll call you in about an hour or so.
Thank you.